There is a particular kind of confusion that arrives right before a life finally turns. It does not feel like a beginning. That is the strange part. It feels like coming apart. The things you used to love stop moving you. The people you used to need start to feel far away. Your ambition, the engine that drove you for years, quietly goes cold, and into that emptiness, strange little signs begin to appear. Coincidences that feel almost aimed at you, a restlessness you cannot explain, the sense that the life you built no longer fits the person wearing it, and you lie awake and wonder what is wrong with you. I want to tell you tonight that nothing is wrong with you. Carl Jung spent his life mapping this exact passage, and he saw that the deepest transformations in a human being almost never announce themselves as growth. They arrive disguised as loss, as confusion, as a slow, disorienting falling apart. Because before a new self can take shape, the old one has to loosen its grip first, and from the inside, the loosening of the old feels identical to the ending of everything. But it is not the ending of everything. Jung understood that the psyche is always quietly working ahead of the conscious mind, dismantling what no longer fits and preparing the ground for what is coming, long before you have any idea what that is. What looks like your life falling apart is very often your life rearranging itself at a level too deep for you to see. The old identity is being taken apart, not to punish you, but because you have outgrown it, and it can no longer contain the person you are becoming. And here is the mistake almost everyone makes. They read the loneliness as rejection. They read the lost motivation as laziness. They read the strange coincidences as meaningless, and the sudden urge to walk away from everything as a sign that something has gone terribly wrong. So, they fight it. They try to force themselves back into a life they have already outgrown, and in doing so, they resist the very process that was trying to deliver them somewhere better. And the loneliest part of it is that no one around you can see what is happening. To them, nothing is wrong. You still show up, still function, still answer when spoken to. There is no wound to point at, no diagnosis, no visible catastrophe, so you cannot explain it, even to the people closest to you, because the words for it sound like madness. My life is fine and I feel like I am disappearing. I have everything I worked for and none of it moves me anymore. And so you carry it alone, this strange unraveling, convinced that you are the only one it is happening to, and quietly afraid that it means you are broken. You are not broken. You are in a passage that almost every person who ever became fully themselves had to walk through, and walk through mostly in silence. So tonight I want to walk you through 8 strange signs that your best chapter has already begun, quietly, underground, before anything on the surface has changed. 8 unsettling shifts that appear precisely when an old inner world is dying and a new one is trying to be born. Some of them are already happening to you, and you have been calling them by the wrong names. And the 8th is the one that finally reveals what all the strangeness was for. Stay with me all the way to the end, because by the time we finish, I think you are going to look at the confusing, uncomfortable chapter you are living through right now very differently. It may not be the beginning of your undoing at all. It may be the moment your real life quietly begins. The first sign is the most physical and the most overlooked. Your body begins to reject your old life before your mind understands why. For years you could tolerate it, the work that never quite fit, the shallow small talk, the rooms full of people who did not really see you. You pushed through on willpower, on the promise of the weekend, on the simple momentum of a life already in motion. And then, at some point, something changes and the pushing stops working. You go to walk into the same building and your chest tightens. You sit down with the same old crowd and a strange fog rolls over your mind so that you can barely follow the conversation. You feel a bone-deep exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. It is as if your own body has started refusing to carry you back into places it has decided you no longer belong. Most people treat this as a problem to be fixed. They reach for more caffeine, more discipline, more willpower. They decide they are becoming weak, or anxious, or simply getting older. But Carl Jung understood something that our culture forgets. He knew that the psyche and the body are not two separate things. They are two faces of one reality. And when a deep change is underway in the soul, the body is where you feel it first, because the body cannot lie the way the mind can. Your mind can talk you into staying in a life that is killing you. Your body eventually refuses. So what feels like your body betraying you is actually your body telling the truth. The exhaustion is not weakness. It is your energy being pulled inward, away from the exhausting performance of your old life, and redirected toward a reconstruction happening deep beneath the surface. You are tired because you are being rebuilt. Think of a powerful new engine being dropped into an old car frame. The whole structure shakes and rattles, not because it is breaking, but because it was never built to hold that much force. You are not falling apart. You are being asked to hold more life than your old shape could contain. And notice what your body specifically rejects. It rejects the fake, the forced smile, the conversation with no depth, the room where everyone is laughing at things that are not funny. Your system is becoming almost allergic to inauthenticity, and that allergy is a form of intelligence. It is discernment, arriving in you at a level below thought. The parts of you that cannot be fooled, the gut, the nervous system, the tightening chest, are beginning to sort your life for you, pulling you away from what is hollow and toward what is real, whether your conscious mind is caught up yet or not. Jung called this kind of descent the night sea journey. You are being pushed off the familiar shore, out into deep water, and the heaviness in your limbs is the sign that the old map is being erased to make room for a truer one. So the next time you feel that wave of unbearable fatigue in a place that used to be fine, or that sudden physical urge to leave a room, do not shame yourself for it. Do not call it social anxiety, or getting old, or losing your edge. Listen to it. Your body is not failing you. It is the first messenger of your best chapter, and it is refusing, on your behalf, to carry you back into a life you have already outgrown. You may know the exact feeling. Sitting in your car in the driveway after an ordinary day, staring at the dashboard, unable to summon the energy to walk into your own home, or standing at the door of a gathering you used to enjoy, feeling your whole body lean back toward the exit before you have even gone in. It is not that you have stopped caring about your life or the people in it. It is that a part of you, deeper than thought, has already begun to leave, and the leaving shows up in your body as a heaviness the mind cannot argue away. You can tell yourself 100 reasons to feel fine, and your chest will still tighten, because the body has cast its vote and it will not be talked out of it. So, if your body has started refusing places and people it used to tolerate, do not rush to medicate it back into compliance, or shame it into carrying you where it no longer wants to go. Listen to what it is refusing, because it is refusing with a wisdom your busy mind has lost. It is not turning against you. It is turning you, gently and stubbornly, away from a life that has quietly stopped being yours, and toward one you cannot see yet, but that some deeper part of you has already chosen. And once the body begins to pull you out of your old life, you will notice the second strange thing, the way time itself starts to come apart. The second sign is that time stops behaving the way it always did. The clock, quietly, begins to break. For most of your life, you lived by the relentless ticking of ordinary time, the hours measured out in tasks and deadlines, the days stacked into weeks, the steady forward march that told you how productive you were and how much of your life had passed. And then, somewhere in this strange season, that steady clock begins to fail. You look up, and 4 hours have vanished in what felt like 20 minutes. Or you sink into a single quiet afternoon and it feels like you have lived an entire year, though the sun has barely moved. Time stretches and collapses. You lose whole stretches of the day. You sit somewhere ordinary and, for a moment, forget how old you are, or what year it is. To the anxious mind, this feels like something malfunctioning. You wonder why you can no longer keep pace with the world, why everyone around you seems to be rushing forward, achieving, checking boxes, while you stand oddly still, watching them through what feels like a pane of glass. But this is not a malfunction. Carl Jung understood that there are two kinds of time. There is the clock time we all live by, the time of schedules and productivity. And there is another kind, a deeper time, measured not in minutes but in meaning. And when a life is about to turn, a person begins, without choosing to slip out of the first kind of time and into the second. The reason your old sense of time is breaking is that your old timeline is expiring. The path you were on, the one built out of social deadlines and other people's expectations, and the schedule you thought your life was supposed to follow, is quietly being dismantled. And as that timeline dissolves, your experience of time itself loses its old shape. It is like a navigation system recalibrating. For a moment the map goes blank, the arrow spins, and you feel utterly lost. But the system is not broken. It is finding a route that did not exist on the old map. Jung believed the unconscious does not experience time the way the conscious mind does. Deep beneath your awareness, past and present and future are not lined up in a neat row. They are all present at once. And when you approach a real turning point, that deeper timelessness begins to seep up into ordinary life. This is why you may suddenly feel a childhood emotion with vivid, overwhelming force, or relive an old moment as though it were happening now. You are not moving backward. Something in you is gathering up the unfinished pieces of your past so that you do not drag them, unexamined, across the threshold into what is coming. There is a danger in this stage, and it is the urge to hurry. When time feels strange and your old life is dissolving, panic whispers that you must fix everything immediately. Start the new thing now. Force the next chapter into being. But the breaking of the clock is telling you the opposite. Your best chapter cannot be rushed, because it is not a place you arrive at by moving faster. It arrives when you stop trying to keep pace with a world you are no longer part of, and let yourself dwell in this strange, stretched, in-between time. This is the hallway of the soul, the quiet space between one life and the next. It feels eerie and lonely, because the old rules no longer apply and the new ones have not yet formed. But it is precisely in this stillness, when you finally stop checking the clock, that the shape of your future begins to make itself known. There is a stranger version of this. When for a moment you lose your age entirely, you catch your reflection, or sit in a quiet room, and you cannot quite feel how old you are, or which year it is, or which chapter of your life you are supposed to be in. For a breath, you feel ageless, as if you are looking at your life from somewhere outside of time. Jung would say that in that moment you have brushed against the deepest part of yourself, the part that was never bound by the clock at all. It passes quickly, and the ordinary world snaps back. But it leaves a mark, a quiet knowing that you are more than the timeline you have been measuring yourself against. And that measuring is the thing to watch. In this stage, you will look at people rushing past you, hitting their milestones on schedule, and feel a stab of panic that you have fallen hopelessly behind. But you are not on their clock anymore. You cannot fall behind on a timeline you have already left. The strange, stretched, unmeasurable quality of your days is not you failing to keep up. It is you being quietly released from a race that was never leading where you actually needed to go. So set down the comparison. Their clock is still ticking because they are still on the old road. Yours has gone quiet because you are being moved to a different one. And that shape starts to arrive through the third strange sign. when you begin to feel like a ghost in your own life. The third sign is the strangest to live inside. You are still physically present in your old world, and yet you feel as though you have already disappeared from it. You have become a ghost in your own life. You still sit at the same dinner table. You still walk the same streets, answer to the same name, show up where you are expected, but something essential has withdrawn. You find yourself in a room full of people you have known for years, and their voices seem to reach you from very far away. You see their lips moving, you understand every word, and yet the emotional thread that used to connect you to them has quietly gone slack. You feel strangely detached, as if you are watching your own life from just outside it, piloting a body that no longer feels entirely like yours. This is frightening, and almost no one talks about it, so you assume it means something is wrong with you. But Carl Jung would recognize it immediately as the dissolving of the old social self, the necessary in-between before a truer center can take command. You feel like a ghost because your energy has genuinely been withdrawn from your old life. For years you poured your psychic energy outward, into managing how people saw you, into seeking approval, into maintaining your place and your image. And now that outward flow has quietly reversed. You have stopped broadcasting. And because so much of who you thought you were lived in that broadcast, in being seen and reflected back by others, the silence of no longer broadcasting can feel like ceasing to exist. But this invisibility is not a punishment. It is a form of protection. When you stop projecting your energy out into the world, you stop being a target for the expectations and projections of everyone around you. People may notice you have changed, or find they can no longer read you, or quietly stop including you. The ego finds this unbearable, because the ego fears being forgotten more than almost anything. It wants to be seen, validated, mirrored. But the deeper self needs this stretch of invisibility. It needs you to become a phantom for a while, so that you can finally observe your own life without being trapped inside it. And that is the gift hidden in the ghostliness. From this strange distance, you begin to see clearly for the first time. You watch the games people play, the small performances, the scripts you yourself followed for years without ever questioning them. You see the patterns of your own life laid out plainly, as if from above. You see, at last, where the exit is. The detachment that frightens you is also lifting you high enough to finally see the whole map. There is even a quiet clarity to it, a sense that the problems that once kept you awake now look like the concerns of a character in a film you have already watched. The danger in this phase is the temptation to force yourself back into solidity too soon. The loneliness of feeling invisible can become so acute that you try to rematerialize, to pick up the old conversations and the old roles just to feel real again, just to be seen. But you cannot go back by putting on the old self like a costume. The people looking for the old you are looking for someone who no longer exists. So if you feel like a phantom right now, do not panic, and do not rush to make yourself visible to people who are searching for a version of you that is already gone. Let yourself be quiet. Let yourself watch. You are moving through the world without leaving footprints because you are being carried, unseen, through the passage into your next chapter. You will notice it in how people begin to relate to you, too. Some of them grow puzzled because they can no longer predict you. The reactions they counted on do not come. The role you always played, you play a little less convincingly. And some, without quite knowing why, begin to drift, to include you a little less, to sense that the person they knew is not quite in the room anymore. This can be quietly devastating, because the ego reads it as rejection, as being left behind, as proof that you are losing the people you love. But look closer. They are not leaving you. They are losing their grip on a version of you that is genuinely dissolving, and their confusion is simply the outer echo of your own inner change. You are becoming unreadable, because you are no longer performing a self that could be easily read. So if you feel yourself going transparent, unseen, strangely absent from your own life, try not to panic and try not to force your way back into visibility. The invisibility is not a punishment or a sign that you are fading away. It is a kind of shelter, a quiet room where you get to observe your whole life without being trapped inside its performances, until you are ready to step back out as someone truer. Let yourself be the ghost for a while. Ghosts, in this passage, are not the dead, they are the not yet born. And it is here, in this hollow quiet, that the fourth strange thing arrives, the one that frightens driven people most of all, the death of your ambition. The fourth sign terrifies people who have built their whole identity on drive. One morning you wake and find the engine of your ambition has simply gone quiet. The fire that pushed you for years, the hunger to prove yourself, the need to achieve, has gone out. In a world that worships doing, this feels like a death sentence. You look at your half-finished projects, your stalled plans, your suddenly quiet life, and panic rises. You tell yourself you have become lazy, that you have lost your edge, that you are falling behind in a race that never stops. You reach for the old motivation and find nothing there. And because our entire culture measures worth by output, a season of not doing feels like proof that you are failing at life itself. But Carl Jung saw something completely different in this loss of drive. He observed that when a person stands on the edge of a real transformation, the unconscious often withdraws the life force, the deep energy he called libido, from the outer world. It pulls that energy inward, like a nation quietly recalling its troops from distant borders before a decisive battle at home. You are not lazy. You are not broken. Your energy has not vanished. It has gone underground because it is needed for work far more important than anything on your to-do list. It is being spent on the reconstruction of you. This is why forcing yourself forward right now does not work. If you manage to summon the old drive, you would only use it to rebuild the very life you are outgrowing, to hammer more nails into a structure that is meant to come down. The loss of ambition is a protective pause. It is your deeper self refusing to let you waste another year of your one precious life building on a foundation that is already being demolished. Imagine an architect commissioned to build a cathedral, but still trying to renovate an old shack on the same ground. Every nail bends, every coat of paint peels. Not because the architect has failed, but because a deeper intelligence will not let the small work continue while the great work is waiting. So the emptiness you feel is not nothing. In physics, a vacuum is not truly empty. It is a space of enormous potential, a low-pressure zone that pulls everything toward it. By clearing out your old ambitions, your psyche is creating exactly such a space, a stillness that will one day draw your real chapter toward you with tremendous force. But for that to happen, the air must first go completely still. The fire must go out before the deeper fire can be lit. And notice that this stillness, terrifying as it feels, is also a kind of mercy. For years you carried the weight of your own striving, the endless pressure to do more, be more, achieve more, prove more, and it wore you down in ways you stopped even noticing, because the wearing down had become the background hum of your life. The death of your ambition is, in part, your deeper self saying, "You have carried this long enough, now set it down." You are not being punished with emptiness. You are being granted a pause you would never have allowed yourself, because you would have called it laziness and whipped yourself back into motion. Life has finally made the striving impossible, so that you have no choice left but to rest and be quietly remade. The most driven people almost always resist this the hardest, because to them, stillness feels indistinguishable from failure. It offends everything they believe about their own worth. But the ones who finally stop fighting it, who let themselves sink into the strange, unproductive quiet without shame, discover that the stillness was never their enemy at all. It was the one condition under which the deep work could finally be done, the fallow winter without which no real spring was ever possible. So let the field lie fallow. Nothing is dying that was meant to live, and everything meant to live is being, right now, invisibly prepared. So if your ambition has died, stop apologizing for your lack of productivity. Stop trying to shock the old drive back to life with stimulants and self-reproach. You are not in a season of action. You are in the cocoon, and the cocoon is not a place of doing. It is a place of dissolution, where the old form breaks down completely so a new one can take shape. Trust the stillness. The energy has not abandoned you. It has simply gone deep to build the person your best chapter requires, and it will return, transformed, when the foundation is ready. And you will try to force it back, at least at first. You will reach for the productivity systems, the motivational books, the stimulants, the harsh inner voice that used to whip you into motion. You will try to shame yourself back into the old drive, and you will find, to your growing alarm, that none of it works anymore. The old levers you used to pull produce nothing. This is not a sign that something has gone wrong with you. It is a sign of how deep this particular change goes. Your usual tricks for manufacturing motivation are failing precisely because the motivation they used to summon was pointed at a life you are no longer meant to build. The engine is not broken. It has simply been switched off from somewhere deeper than your willpower can reach. And no amount of pushing will override that decision. So if your drive has vanished and nothing you do can revive it, consider that the inability to force it is itself the mercy. If you could still whip yourself into motion right now, you would only spend your last reserves rebuilding the very life that is meant to fall away. The stillness is not laziness, and it is not depression to be fixed, though it can wear the face of both. It is a protected pause, a holy idleness, in which your deeper self is doing the quiet, invisible work of deciding what to keep and what to let burn. Your job, for now, is not to produce. It is to trust the stillness and to let yourself be rebuilt. And while it works down there in the dark, you will begin to notice the fifth strange thing, a long-standing inner noise, suddenly going silent. The fifth sign is subtle, and you may only notice it by its absence. The old inner interference, the static that has run underneath your whole life, begins to go quiet. All your life you have carried certain patterns that seem to run themselves. The flare of defensiveness when someone questioned you. The old fear that rose up in exactly the same situations, again and again. The reaction you always had. The button that always got pushed. The feeling you could never quite control. You may have called it your personality, or simply the way you are. Carl Jung had a more precise name for these. He called them complexes, clusters of memory and emotion and old wounding, gathered around a core hurt that operate beneath your awareness and quietly seize the controls the moment something familiar triggers them. For most of your life, these complexes have been the hidden authors of your story. You thought you were making a free choice, and you were often reacting to a decades-old wound you could not even see. You thought you were reading a situation clearly, and you were seeing it through the cracked lens of an old fear. Jung put it starkly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he wrote, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So much of what you called bad luck, or bad timing, or simply your nature, was really the interference of these buried patterns, pulling every event into their old orbit. And in this strange season, something remarkable begins to happen. The static starts to clear, not because the old wounds have been surgically removed, but because they are losing their charge, their power to instantly take you over. You begin to catch the pattern in the act. You feel the old familiar heat start to rise, the reaction you have had 1,000 times, and for the first time there is a small gap, a sliver of space, in which you realize This is the old thing, and I do not have to obey it. That gap is everything. It is the difference between being run by your history and being free of it. You might notice it in a plain moment. A situation that would once have sent you spiraling into anxiety or anger arrives and passes, and you realize afterward that the old reaction never fully took hold. You did not have to fight it down. It simply had less grip than it used to, and you cannot quite say when it began to loosen. This is the quiet dissolving of the complex, and it changes the entire frequency of your life, because so much of your energy was being spent invisibly, managing these inner triggers, bracing against them, cleaning up after them. As they lose their power, that energy comes flooding back to you, and you feel a strange new steadiness, a groundedness you did not know was possible. This is why this stage feels like the brakes coming off. You realize, with a kind of shock, that you were never lacking talent or intelligence or capacity. You were carrying an enormous, invisible weight, a lifetime of inner static, and now, quietly, it is lifting. In the silence where the old interference used to scream, you can finally hear something else. Your own clear response to your own real life, unclouded, for the first time, by the ghosts of your past. Notice how you used to defend these patterns without even realizing it. You would say, "That is just who I am. I have always been the anxious one, the jealous one, the one who shuts down under pressure." And the moment you filed a reaction under your unchangeable nature, you stopped questioning it, because questioning it would have felt like questioning your own existence. That is how the old self hides most cleverly of all. It disguises a wound as an identity, so that you defend the very thing that keeps you small. For years you have been guarding a prison, mistaking its walls for your own bones. So the fact that these patterns now bother you, that you can feel the gap between the old reaction and the person you want to be, is not a setback. It is the first light getting in. You are beginning to see the pattern as a pattern rather than as your fate. And a wound you can finally see, as a wound has already begun to lose its grip on you. Do not be discouraged when the old reaction still fires sometimes. It will, for a while. What matters is the new sliver of space around it, the moment of recognition where once there was only reflex. That small space is where your freedom lives, and it is widening, quietly. Every day you refuse to simply obey the old script. And once that inner noise goes quiet, once you are no longer drowning in your own static, you become able to perceive the sixth strange thing, which was probably happening all along, but which you were never still enough to notice: the arrival of meaningful coincidence. The sixth sign is the one people find hardest to believe and easiest to dismiss. Meaningful coincidences begin to appear, and they appear with a frequency that becomes impossible to ignore. You think of someone you have not spoken to in years, and that afternoon they call. You are wrestling with a question you cannot answer, and a stranger says the exact thing you needed to hear. You encounter the same idea, the same image, the same phrase, 3 times in a single day, arriving from unrelated directions. To the purely rational mind, these are nothing. Random noise, given false meaning by a mind hungry for patterns. And it is worth being honest and grounded here, because this is the point where reflection can tip into wishful thinking. Not every coincidence is a message. But Carl Jung, one of the most careful minds of the last century, noticed that in the life of a person undergoing deep transformation, these meaningful coincidences cluster in a way that is genuinely striking, and he gave the phenomenon a name. He called it synchronicity. Jung's insight was not that the universe is magically rearranging itself to serve your desires. It was subtler and more interesting than that. He observed that when a person reaches a certain depth of inner integration, when the war between their conscious mind and their unconscious depths begins to quiet, they start to notice connections between their inner state and outer events that carry real meaning, even without any ordinary cause linking them. The coincidences may not be increasing. What is changing is you. The static has cleared enough that you can finally perceive the patterns that were always there. You have become quiet enough to notice what you were too busy and too full of noise to see before. And this changes how you move through the world. For most of your life, you approached your future the way our whole culture teaches, as a machine to be forced. You believed you had to build every step by sheer effort, trace every cause to every effect, worry over each link in the chain, and that if you could not see the path from where you stood to where you wanted to be, then no path existed. But in this new season, you begin to hold your life more lightly. You start to notice, rather than force. You pay attention to the odd meeting, the book that falls open to the right page, the chance remark that lands like an answer. You stop demanding that the way forward announce itself in a logical, linear form, and you start noticing that it often arrives sideways, through what looks at first like a distraction. This is not a call to passivity, and it is not a license to stop doing your part. It is what Jung might describe as a shift from forcing to responding. You still act, but your action stops being a desperate attempt to make the world bend and becomes instead a response to a world that has quietly started moving in your direction. You lay your bricks, and you begin to sense that the bridge is also growing toward you from the far side. There is a cooperation in it that the grinding, forcing mind could never feel, because the forcing mind was too loud to notice it. So when the coincidences begin, do not dismiss them, and do not inflate them into magic either. Simply pay attention. Write them down. Let them show you that you are no longer a lone ego fighting a hostile world, but a person whose inner life and outer life have begun, quietly, to speak to each other. This is the sign that the long dissolution is turning, at last, toward arrival. The strange things are no longer only taking your old life apart. They are beginning to point, unmistakably, toward the new one. And there is a deeper way to understand what is actually happening, one that keeps both feet on the ground. Jung came to believe that mind and matter are not as separate as we assume, that they are, at some deep level, two faces of a single reality. You do not need to accept the whole of that idea to feel its everyday version. When your inner world is at war, you move through the outer world braced, defensive, half-blind, and you miss the openings that are right in front of you. When your inner world quiets, you perceive what was always there. The doors did not appear, your eyes cleared. Either way, the practical result is the same. Life begins to feel less like a wall you are throwing yourself against, and more like a current you can finally feel the direction of. You will know the difference between a trivial coincidence and a meaningful one by the way it lands in your body. A trivial coincidence is a shrug, forgotten in a second. A meaningful one carries a strange weight, a quiet jolt of recognition, as if some part of you already knew it was coming. You turn a decision over in your mind for weeks, unable to resolve it, and a stranger says the one sentence that dissolves the whole knot. You cannot stop thinking about a direction you abandoned years ago, and the same forgotten name surfaces 3 times in a single week, from 3 people who have never met. It is not that these things could not happen by chance. It is that they arrive exactly when their meaning is ripe, and they land with an authority that bypasses the logical mind entirely. Jung was careful, as a scientist, never to claim he could prove why this occurs. He only insisted, as an honest observer of thousands of lives, that in people undergoing real transformation, it happens too precisely and too meaningfully to simply explain away. And the reason it seems to begin now, in this particular season, is not that the universe has suddenly taken an interest in you. It is that the noise has finally dropped enough for you to hear a signal that was always faintly there. When you were consumed by the static of your complexes, braced and defended and half asleep, these quiet correspondences passed you by unnoticed. Now that the inner volume has come down, you catch them. The world has not started speaking to you. You have finally gone quiet enough to listen. So take the coincidences as an invitation to pay closer attention, not as a promise that the universe will now hand you whatever you want. Stay grounded. Keep doing your part. But start noticing the sideways gifts, the chance conversations, the strange rightness of certain timings, and let them teach you that you are not, and never were, a lone soul fighting a hostile world. Something in you and something in the world have begun, quietly, to move together. That is not magic. It is what alignment feels like from the inside. And it is one of the surest signs that the long dissolution is finally turning toward arrival. And as that new life comes into focus, you will feel the seventh strange thing settle into you. A quiet authority you did not have to manufacture. The seventh sign is a quiet authority that begins to settle into you. And the strange thing about it is that you did not have to build it. It simply arrives as a byproduct of everything that has been dissolving. For most of your life, whatever power you had was conditional. It rested on your title, your income, your usefulness, the approval of the people around you. It was borrowed from outside, and because it was borrowed, it was fragile, and some part of you always knew it. You had to keep proving yourself, keep defending your place, keep performing to hold it. But as you move through this passage, as the complexes lose their grip and the energy once trapped in inner conflict comes flooding back, something changes in how you occupy a room. You stop needing to prove anything, and people feel it. Carl Jung had a name for this stage. He borrowed a word from the islands of the Pacific, mana, meaning a kind of extraordinary force or presence that certain people seem to carry. When a person has done the deep work, when they have stopped being divided against themselves, a large amount of psychic energy that was bound up in that inner war is set free, and it begins to radiate outward as a calm, unmistakable authority, not loudness, not dominance, something quieter and heavier. People sense that you are no longer fragmented, no longer at war with your own hidden impulses, and they respond to that wholeness with a kind of instinctive respect, sometimes even a little awe. In a world of people pulled in every direction, a person who has become whole carries a weight that others can feel the moment they walk in. And here you begin to notice that the friction of your life quietly drops away. The constant need to argue your case, to fight for your seat at the table, to convince and cajole and prove, begins to dissolve. You find you can influence without forcing, that your words carry more weight when you speak less, that people move aside where they used to block you. It is not that you have gained some power over others. It is that you have stopped leaking your power into the endless project of managing how you are seen. The energy that used to go into performance now simply is you, grounded and present, and that presence does its own quiet work. But Carl Jung attached a stern warning to this stage, and it matters, because this is exactly where people go wrong. The moment you feel this new authority, the ego will try to claim it. It will whisper that this power belongs to you, that you have become special, elevated, above others. Jung called this inflation, and he considered it one of the great dangers of the whole journey. The person who falls into it becomes a kind of false prophet, drunk on their own imagined greatness, and the gold they found turns back to lead in their hands. The one who moves through this stage safely understands something crucial. The authority is real, but it is not personal. It does not belong to the small, proud self. It flows through you from something deeper, and your task is to be a clear channel for it, not to strut around claiming to be its source. And it is precisely that humility, that refusal to inflate, that makes the authority unshakable, because there is no vanity left in it for anyone to attack. So if you feel this new steadiness settling into you, this sense that you no longer need to chase or prove or perform, receive it gratefully and hold it lightly. Do not let the ego crown itself. You have not become better than other people. You have become more fully yourself, and the quiet authority you feel is simply what a whole person carries. This is not the end of the journey, but it is the end of the struggle to be seen, because you have finally begun to see yourself. You will notice, too, that you have stopped performing for an audience, and the relief of it is enormous. For most of your life, there was a subtle running calculation underneath everything. How am I being perceived? Am I impressing them? Am I enough in their eyes? And somewhere in this passage, that calculation simply switches off. You do the work for the sake of the work. You speak because something true wants to be said, not because you are collecting a reaction. It can feel lonely at first, this stepping off the stage, because you spent so long needing the mirror of other people's approval to feel real. But it is a sovereign loneliness, the solitude of high ground, and it slowly turns from something you fear into something you would not trade back. So if you feel this quiet authority arriving, guard it from the one thing that can poison it, which is the ego trying to make it a trophy. The moment you start to feel special, chosen, better than the people around you, you have stepped off the true path and into inflation, and the gold turns to lead. The people who carry real presence are almost always humble, because they know the strength moving through them is not their personal possession. Stay grounded in that. You have not risen above others. You have simply come home to yourself, and a person who is truly at home in themselves has no need to stand on anyone. And that shift opens the way to the eighth and final strange thing, the one that all the others were quietly leading toward. The moment you stop becoming and simply are. The eighth sign is the quietest of all, and it is the one every other sign has been preparing you for. One day you realize the strange things have stopped, and you are no longer becoming someone. You simply are. There is no fanfare when it happens. That is what surprises people. You keep waiting for a finish line, a moment of arrival, some external confirmation that you have finally made it. It never comes, because you have stopped needing it. You wake one ordinary morning and notice the static is gone. The war inside you has quieted. The gap you used to feel between who you were on the inside and how you were living on the outside has closed, and you are, at last, simply living as yourself, without the exhausting translation in between. Carl Jung called this individuation, and he considered it the true goal of a human life. Not perfection, not success, not becoming some flawless, elevated version of a person. Individuation is the slow, hard becoming of the specific individual you always had it in you to be. In our early decades, most of us live as collective beings, assembled out of other people's expectations, our parents' conditioning, the roles our society handed us, the scripts we absorbed before we could question them. Individuation is the long process of sorting through all of that, keeping what is genuinely yours, and setting down what never was, until what remains is a whole and undivided self. And when that happens, your outer life finally catches up to your inner truth. This is the secret underneath the rightness of this chapter. For years, there was a gap between the person you sensed yourself to be and the life you were actually living. And that gap was the source of the anxiety, the friction, the sense of being blocked at every turn. It was as if you were a musician trying to play a symphony on a broken instrument. All this strange dissolution, the body's rebellion, the breaking of time, the ghostliness, the death of ambition, the clearing of the static, was the repair of the instrument. And once the instrument is whole and in tune, the music of your life can finally be played the way it was always meant to sound. The right opportunities begin to appear, not because the world suddenly favors you, but because you have finally become the person who can receive them and not sabotage them. And your relationship with your own destiny changes completely. To the unintegrated person, fate feels like something that happens to them, often something random or cruel. But as you become whole, you begin to see that your destiny is, in large part, the outer expression of your inner character. You stop feeling like a victim of circumstance and start feeling like a participant in your own unfolding. You discover you have a calling that is uniquely yours, and when you follow it, life seems to meet you halfway, not by magic, but because you have finally stopped resisting your own nature. You are no longer swimming against the current of your own soul. In a sense, you have become the current. And here is the final gift. The need for validation quietly falls away. In every earlier chapter, part of why you wanted things to go right was to prove your worth to the world. Now you simply know your worth, because you have met yourself fully and made peace with what you found, the light and the shadow both. You no longer need the world to say yes to you, because you have said yes to yourself. And in one of life's great ironies, it is precisely that absence of need, that quiet completeness, that the world finds most magnetic of all. You have become grounded, whole, and sovereign. This is not the end of your story, but it is the end of the war. And on the far side of all that strangeness, you find that your best chapter was never a stroke of luck waiting to arrive. And you may wonder what this arrival actually looks like, because it is far more ordinary than the word suggests. It does not look like a person who has transcended their problems. It looks like a person who has stopped abandoning themselves inside them. It is a quiet morning where you notice you are no longer bracing against your own life. It is saying the true thing and feeling the sky not fall. It is a small, steady warmth underneath an ordinary day that does not depend on anyone's approval to remain. You keep waiting for the dramatic sign that you have arrived, and it never comes, because arrival, it turns out, is not loud. It is the simple, unspectacular peace of no longer being at war with yourself. So do not miss it by looking for something grander, the strange things quieting down, the static clearing, the ordinary day that suddenly feels like enough. That is the arrival. That is the best chapter, not as a fantasy of everything going perfectly, but as the lived reality of a person who has finally become whole enough to meet their life as it is. You spent so long trying to become someone worthy of a good life. It turns out the good life was always waiting on the other side of simply becoming yourself. It was you, quietly becoming someone who could finally live it. So what do you actually do while you are inside this strange passage, before any of it makes sense? Because it is one thing to be told the confusion is preparation, and another to live through it without losing your nerve. The first thing is the hardest, and Carl Jung considered it essential. You have to learn to hold the tension without rushing to resolve it. When your old life is dissolving and the new one has not yet appeared, everything in you screams to fix it, to force a decision, to grab any exit just to end the discomfort of not knowing. But the deep work happens precisely in that uncertainty. Jung observed that if you can bear to stay in the tension, to sit in the middle of the not knowing without forcing a premature answer, the unconscious will eventually offer something you could never have reasoned your way to. A third possibility, a way through that logic could not see, that appears only because you were willing to wait in the dark for it. So when you feel the urge to hurry, to make it all resolve today, practice staying. Let the question stay open a little longer than is comfortable. That open space is not empty. It is where your future is being formed. The second practice is to protect what is forming before it is strong enough to survive the world. In this strange season, you will feel a powerful instinct to go quiet, to stop explaining yourself, to keep the changes happening inside you private. Honor that instinct. What is emerging in you is still fragile, and if you expose it too early, if you hand it over to people who can only see the old you, they will unknowingly pour their own fears and doubts onto it, and it can wither before it has roots. This is not about becoming secretive or cut off. It is about knowing that some things need to grow in the dark before they can stand in the light. Guard the new life until it is strong enough to speak for itself. And be careful, too, not to name it too early, even to yourself. There is a temptation, when something new begins to stir in you, to immediately pin it down, to decide it means you must start this business, or end that relationship, or move to that city. But if you name the thing too soon, you shrink it. If you decide it is a business, it can only ever be a business. If you decide it is one specific plan, you close off every larger possibility it was still quietly holding open. What is forming in you is, for now, deliberately formless, and that formlessness is not a problem to be solved. It is where its power lives. Let it stay uncertain a while longer. Let it be a quiet, unnamed sense of direction rather than a fixed conclusion. The old alchemists had a rule that the great work had to be kept sealed while it transformed, because exposed too early, it was ruined. What is changing in you follows the same law. Keep it sealed. Let it finish becoming, in the dark, before you drag it into the light and hand it a name it may quickly outgrow. Here is what holding the tension can actually look like, so it does not stay abstract. Say you are torn between staying in a life that is safe but slowly deadening you, and leaping towards something you cannot yet name. The ego wants you to resolve it now, today, one way or the other, just to end the agony of not knowing. Holding the tension means refusing both the premature leap and the resigned retreat, and instead saying, honestly, I do not know yet, and I am willing not to know for a while longer. It means carrying the open question with you into sleep, into your walks, into the quiet hours, without forcing it shut. And what Carl Jung observed, again and again, is that if you can bear that discomfort without collapsing it, a third thing eventually surfaces, unbidden, from somewhere deeper than your reasoning mind. Not the safe option, and not the reckless one, but a way through you could never have thought your way to. It arrives on its own timing, and only to the person patient enough to wait in the dark for it. So when the pressure to decide becomes almost unbearable, understand that this is precisely the moment to stay a little longer in the not knowing. The answer is forming beneath the surface. It is simply not ready yet to be seen, and if you force it too early, you get only the small, frightened answer your ego could reach, instead of the larger one your soul was preparing. And the third practice is to keep asking the question that turns all of this from torment into meaning. Not, when will this finally be over? But, who am I becoming through this? Because that is the only part of this passage that is truly in your hands. You cannot rush the dissolution. You cannot force the arrival. But you can meet each strange day with a little more trust, a little less shame, and the quiet willingness to be changed by it. And that willingness is not passive. It is the most active and courageous thing a person can do, to let the old self die without a fight, and to trust that something truer is being born in its place. So if you have recognized yourself somewhere in these 8 strange signs, let this be what you carry out of here tonight. You are not falling apart. The exhaustion, the broken sense of time, the ghostly distance, the death of your drive, the strange coincidences, the confusion you cannot name, none of it is the sound of your life ending. It is the sound of your old life cracking open so a truer one can emerge. What feels like the most confusing chapter of your life may in fact be the most important one. The passage where your real self is finally being born. You do not have to force it. You could not force it if you tried. This kind of transformation moves at its own depth and its own pace, underground, in the dark, the way the most important things always grow. Your only task is to stop fighting the dissolution, to stop trying to resurrect a life you have already outgrown, and to let yourself be carried through the strangeness to the other side. Be gentle with yourself while it happens. Give yourself the patience you would give a seed in winter, which is doing the most important work of its life at the exact moment it looks like it is doing nothing at all. And when you finally reach the other side of this, and one day you will, you are going to understand something you cannot possibly see from inside the confusion tonight. that you could not have arrived here any other way, that every strange and frightening part of it, the exhaustion, the ghostliness, the death of your drive, the coming apart, was not the passage going wrong. It was the passage working exactly as it had to. You will look back at the person you were before all of this began, and instead of judgment you will feel a strange tenderness for them, because they were carrying so much they did not need, and performing a self that was never quite theirs. And they had no idea that the falling apart they feared so much was the beginning of finally coming home. You will not resent this strange season then. You may even, one day, find yourself grateful for it. And if this strange season has frightened you, and you needed tonight to hear that it means something, then leave one word in the comments below for where you are right now. It might be dissolving, it might be lost, it might be becoming, whatever is truest for you tonight. Because there are far more of us moving through this quiet, disorienting passage than any of us can see, each one convinced they are the only one coming apart. You are not alone in it. And if these words reach something real in you, stay close, subscribe, and walk the rest of this with us, one strange and sacred chapter at a time. This is a channel for exactly this. The confusing, lonely, holy work of letting an old self die so that the person you were always meant to be can finally step forward. Take care of yourself. Be gentle with who you are becoming, and gentle with the frightened, faithful person you have been through all of this strangeness. And whenever the confusion gets heavy, come back and sit here again, because there will always be another word of company waiting for you here. I will see you in the next awakening.